Hello and welcome. UVA Speaks is a podcast of Lifetime Learning, a division of the Office of Engagement at the University of Virginia. Lifetime Learning brings the knowledge and expertise of UVA's faculty to the university's alumni, friends, and families. My name is Susan Lynch, and I am the Associate Director of Lifetime Learning at the University of Virginia's Office of Engagement. This podcast features Leora Friedberg. She's an associate professor and vice chair of the Department of Economics and an associate professor in the Frank Batten School of Leadership and Public Policy at the University of Virginia. Her research interests include public and labor economics and domestic policy. Friedberg is the co-director of the Retirement Research Institute and a faculty affiliate at the Virginia Center for Tax Law. Her list of publications is pages long on her CV. In this podcast, Professor Friedberg will talk with us about Social Security. So thank you, Professor, for speaking with me today.
Oh, you're welcome. I love talking about Social Security.
Great. So thank you. First, can you give us some history and background on Social Security? Basically, when and why was it developed?
Yeah, so Social Security in the U.S. began during the Great Depression, when a lot of people unexpectedly lost all their savings and their jobs and so on. It gave people a way to retire. Otherwise, they might have really struggled. And that's when a lot of social insurance programs were set up in the U.S. The first Social Security program was in Germany in the late 1800s. Under Kaiser Wilhelm, who was, and the Chancellor Bismarck, who was apparently quite an innovator, and it sort of spread from there.
Okay, interesting. So thank you for that context. You know, there have certainly been reports and concerns over the last decade or so about the solvency of Social Security here in the United States. Is there a cause for concern?
Well, so the reports are accurate. I think some of the fears are not, in the following sense. So the reports that the trust fund will be exhausted within the next 10 years or so are correct, or, to the best of our ability to forecast. But what that means is that at that point, Social Security will still be able to pay people approximately 3/4 of their promised benefits, because the money will still be coming in. So Social Security will not be gone, will not totally disappear. And the word bankrupt as a legal term just means your assets don't meet your liabilities. But you still have assets. In this case, you still have revenue coming in. And so I think people might find that a little misleading and think, oh, Social Security will be gone after the next 10 years. And I absolutely don't think that will be the case.
Okay, is this a case of the fact that we have more people retiring and less people working? I mean, what is that the demographic thing, or what is the cause of that?
That's certainly a big part of it. Interestingly, when Social Security was established, it was intended to be fully funded. The benefits would be saved to pay, the taxes would be saved to pay for the benefits that you earned. And right away, there were very few people retiring at the beginning under Social Security and many, many, many workers. So there was a ton of money coming in, and they started to expand benefits without expanding taxes. And so in the first few years of its existence, they started to move away from full funding. But that didn't catch up to them until the 1970s or so, because there were still many workers. And also another factor was productivity growth, was raising wages and expanding the tax base. And so it looked like there was just plenty of money coming in. But then they started to see, yes, demographics were turning against the program. And this is not unique to the US. This has happened in every country as economies have gotten richer and lifespans have increased and health has improved. We've had fewer children. And so you see what's sometimes called an inverted pyramid at its extreme in China, under the one-child policy, they have very few children and many, many grandparents that those children have to support. We're not nearly in that situation, but it has happened everywhere. And the generosity of the system hasn't been adjusted so to account for that. So we still have we have the same benefit formulas with less tax revenue per beneficiary coming in. And so that has shifted the finances. This was recognized back in the late 1970s, as I said. The Greenspan Commission, Greenspan, who went on to become chair of the Federal Reserve, Greenspan Commission in 1983 was the first reform and was the first benefit cut. It wasn't called that, but they they raised the full retirement age for cohorts retiring beginning in 2000. So 17 years later, gave people plenty of time to adjust. That amounted to a benefit cut, and that's happened. They also increased taxes and they established the trust fund. But they pretty soon recognized that that wasn't still going to cover everything. And so even from the 90s, they were forecasting that by the 2030s, the trust fund would be exhausted. So the extra taxes they were collecting for a while would no longer suffice to pay benefits. So none of this is a surprise. The trust fund forecasts have shifted by a few years back and forth. But we've known this is coming for a very long time, and it's come sooner in a lot of other countries, not because they established their social security system sooner, but because those systems were actually more generous. In a lot of European countries, they've already had to make more substantial adjustments. So it's not unique to the U.S. and it's not as severe in the U.S. as in other countries, which is not to say that it's not a problem. We will have to deal with this.
Right. So thank you. So given these concerns, and I remember hearing about some of those things. So that
Back
is
when we were all much younger.
Yeah, exactly. Given these concerns, have there been calls for reform, and in what have those proposed reforms look like?
Yeah, there have been proposals over the years, some quite radical, but a lot very incremental. And incremental reform means sort of keeping the basic structure of taxes and benefits, but changing things at the margin, like raising tax rates, cutting benefits slightly, cutting benefits more for high earners. So there are a lot of incremental proposals. Many of your listeners may remember the 2005 commission by President Bush. Once he got reelected, he said, I have a mandate to reform. He campaigned on it, tax reform, Social Security reform, and he established a commission to come up with a proposal. That was a radical reform. That was shifting the whole structure of Social Security to private accounts. People didn't like that idea. It has not been revived. And so the incremental reforms are not surprises. What you have to do to make ends meet is cut spending and or raise taxes. And the details differ across many different reform proposals, and there are different ways to raise taxes. For example, we could raise the tax rate. Much more often, what you hear about is extending the ceiling on taxable earnings. Right now, taxable earnings are capped at around people who earn more than around $140,000 per year don't pay additional taxes on earnings above that amount. That makes it a regressive tax, but the reason for that is benefits also don't increase for earnings above that amount. So we could increase the ceiling on taxable benefits, taxable earnings without increasing benefits commensurately, and raise taxes that way. We could take other revenue. Vice President Gore, when he was campaigning in the late 90s, proposed using our surplus. Remember those days when we had a government surplus, using the surplus to pay off the Social Security shortfall, or to save the money for the shortfall. So those are the kind of the nature of tax increases. Benefit cuts could take a lot of different forms too. I mentioned raising the full retirement age. Well, the full retirement age is when you get your 100% of your benefit obligation. If you increase the age when you get that, then benefits are cut at other ages. You can also make there are proposals to make benefits more progressive in the sense of cutting benefits for high earners, preserving it for low earners. There are proposals to cut cost of living increases or to cut the indexation of how wages get translated into benefits. All of those affect people in different ways, affect young versus old differently, high earners versus low earners differently. So the details matter, which proposals you consider, but the general point of cutting benefits, raising taxes is not a mystery and has been carried out in many other countries. So I anticipate that reform will take, some combination of those things that spreads the pain, and won't happen until we really feel a lot of alarm. And we obviously don't feel that alarm today. We feel like, kind of nervous anxiety, but I think right now there's still a political cost for actually proposing those things, cutting benefits, raising taxes. So politicians aren't going to propose them. Voters penalize politicians who do propose them. So until we're all, anxious enough to accept some of that pain, then we're not going to undertake those reforms. But I think in the next 10 years, something will happen along those lines.
Yeah, I certainly haven't heard anything about it as of yet for this election cycle. So, you're probably right, is that, we're just going to have to wait a little bit until it becomes really painful, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to, we blame politicians for not, for not proposing anything painful, but we're the ones who vote for them. So I think it's really on us.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So one of the aspects of Social Security is that everyone eligible needs to consider when one should start claiming Social Security benefits. Are there incentives to delay claiming benefits?
Yeah, I think this is really, something that people in the audience who are approaching retirement want to understand better. And yes, there are incentives to delay. The early claiming age is 62. Many people do retire before 62, and more often those are low-income, low-skilled workers who need their benefits as soon as they can get them. Many other people in my demographic have the ability to wait and delay claiming. And the reward for delaying is it's actuarially fair on average, which means that for someone with average lifespan, for each year you delay, you get an increase in your benefits over your remaining lifetime that adds up in expectation. So, of course, we don't know when we're going to die. And Social Security gives you longevity insurance. The people who live a long time get more benefits and the people who die sooner don't. And that helps pay for benefits for the long-lived. But when I say actuarially fair on average, that means that it's supposed to be neutral for someone with the average lifespan. What we do see happening over the last 20 years or so is that this is some of my recent research, people who live longer are claiming later. So they're kind of undoing the neutrality of that formula. So they're going to get a better deal for claiming later because they're going to get that benefit increase for a longer period of time. Like I said, I think there are a lot of important reasons why people who claim early have to do that and do that. But to the extent people can afford to wait to claim, then that's you get a pretty good rate of return. Actuarially fair on average comes out to about 8% a year. Imagine it like a stock market return. That's a pretty good return. And it's effectively adjusted for inflation. So if one strategy that financial advisors recommend is you can fund that delay by consuming some of your 401k or IRA if you have one, and that's going to work in your favor for the most part.
Okay, thank you. So there are things to think about as one.
Up to age 70, you have that decision of delaying gets you more benefits for for when you do claim.
Okay, great. Thank you. And finally, I understand that some of your research touches on concerns of overall inequality in the United States and how that contributes to inequality and gains from Social Security. Can you please explain some of your research in that regard?
Yeah, we have the ability now to use Social Security administrative records to learn a lot more about how much people pay in taxes and how much people get in benefits. Before, we had like survey research, and it was very hard to get at that. With administrative data, I have a research partner at the Social Security Administration. We can see a lot more about how Social Security redistributes and whether it redistributes as intended. And what I mean by that is Social Security is set up as a social insurance program where we all get benefits, but those of us who are unlucky in some dimensions, for example, lower lifetime earnings, get higher benefits relative to lifetime earnings. So a higher replacement rate for low lifetime earners and a lower replacement rate for high lifetime earners. Another unlucky thing, which has important effects, is if your partner dies earlier than expected. And so there are survivor benefits that raise your benefits as a function of your married partner's benefits. So that's not available to people who are cohabiting, but to people who are married. And it's an important gain for people in same-sex couples, for example, who now have the ability to marry. Mm-hmm. So all of that insurance function of Social Security is meant to protect people who did not do as well in their life and through their earnings or their or lifespan. As I said, one thing that our research is showing, though, is that a lot of people who are disadvantaged in one dimension are also disadvantaged in another dimension that undercuts some of that redistribution. So, for example, low lifetime earners now are less likely to be married than high lifetime earners. So they don't get the gains from a survivor benefit in their household. You get a survivor benefit without paying for it, in effect. Two workers, one married, one single, pay the same amount in taxes if they have the same lifetime earnings, but the married worker gets their spouse is entitled to survivor benefits if it exceeds their own worker benefits. So that kind of inequality in ex post outcomes is now, we see that being related to lifetime earnings in a way that undercuts some of that redistribution. Another example is a really important one is longevity. It used to be that there wasn't much of what I'll call a socioeconomic gradient in longevity. Rich people, poor people had similar longevity. Now we see high lifetime earners and low lifetime earners are increasingly divergent. And high lifetime earners live quite a bit longer on average than low lifetime earners. So they're going to get a better deal from Social Security, even though they're not as needy. And so it's in those dimensions that we see that whatever socioeconomic forces are affecting longevity, affecting marriage, are also getting transmitted through the Social Security system.
Right. And so your research, are there certain things that you're proposing through your research?
Well, the proposals will come later. We're quantifying these differences, so there could be changes. We don't want to make widows worse off,
right?
And so there could be changes involving how unmarried people are treated by Social Security that wouldn't make widows that wouldn't impoverish widows. So and there are other proposals that to address things like married parents who withdraw from the labor force for a while and don't earn as much from Social Security. So there are a lot of proposals out there that we'll be able to say something about as our research advances.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Professor Friedberg, for sharing this information about Social Security. Obviously, this is a topic that's important to many people, and for many older folks, Social Security provides an important source of income, as we've discussed. And those of us that are looking ahead to this time in our life, as we've discussed, it's something to consider from a policy perspective, to ask the question of those who we are going to vote for and to find out.
Well, when I teach Social Security to undergrads, it's very illuminating to them. They're like, I did not know that's how things worked. And, that's what their taxes, how the taxes and benefits are linked and so on. But they actually go home and tell their parents things that their parents didn't know either. And their parents are closer to making those decisions, for example, about when to claim Social Security.
Yeah, for sure. And so it's important to ask these questions, learn about this, ask these questions of ourselves. And as I've said, ask these questions of the people that we're voting for. As you mentioned, in a democracy, we support, we put the people in, and they make the decisions. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise with UVA's alumni, friends, and families. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it.
Okay, and thank you for listening. For upcoming podcasts and other lifetime learning programming, recordings, and blogs, please visit our website at engagement.virginia.edu/learn. You can also find our podcasts on the Virginia Audio Collective, which is a network of UVA podcasts hosted by WTJU Radio and can be found at virginiaaudio.org. So thanks to you again, and we look forward to you taking part in future lifetime learning programs.